Thank you. It's nice to be back in Ottawa. I think I read once this series when I was at the Royal Oak Pub.
Yes.
It was many years ago. Of course, I would like to introduce you all to my new book. We don't actually have the book, but I have parts of it. So I will introduce you to those parts of it. I want to thank you all for coming, especially my wife Kate and her parents who have come a long way to be here, and my friend Harold who drove me up from Montreal so I could be here, and everybody else who's arrived and to see me and the other readers, and special thanks to the organizers of today's event. And that was a lovely introduction. I've never been introduced by book review before, I don't think. I'm going to read two pieces. One is short and one is longish, medium-ish long. The new book has 12 stories. They're sort of organized in 4 sections. And maybe there's 16 stories in 4 sections. 16 stories in 4 sections. In any case, there's 4 sections. Each section is introduced with a short vignette about a boy, and the boy in each of the 4 vignettes gets a little bit older, and so there is a theme in the short story collection, even though they're not linked stories about growing up and trying to make sense of things, and hopefully they don't provide pat answers. The first vignette is about the boy, unnamed boy. He's 2 years old. And this was a bit of an exercise to myself to try and write a story about a 2-year-old. You know, the 2-year-old has some kind of internal monologue, but maybe not exactly sure what it is. I wrote it just at the time when my nephew was about that age. He's now 11. So it's sort of based on my observances of him. But it's just a vignette, and it's very sort of impressionistic. I'll just read it. It's fairly short. The boy pointed at the boy on the bike and said, "Boy, boy." His mother smiled. "Yes, that's a boy, isn't it?" The boy didn't think of himself as a boy. He was not yet 2, and all he knew of the world was love. His left hand held a stick. He poked it into the ground and twisted it as the earth turned over. He was in the park near his house with his mother, a park he visited at least once a day. He didn't think any more of the snow that had once covered the ground. It had come and gone before he had words. He thought only about the world and all of the things in it, each of them a wonder. He liked everything, and he was rarely tired. The boy laughed and pulled the stick from the ground. A piece of dirt jumped out of the small hole and over the grass. The boy followed it with a quick twist of his head. He laughed again and stuck the stick back in the hole. The boy was always laughing, always learning new tricks. At daycare, he'd learned to slide his fingers into the corners of his mouth and pull back against his cheeks. Over the past 2 days, he performed this trick 2 or 3 dozen times, accompanying himself with a low growl. Suddenly, he pulled the stick from the ground and began to run. "Aye, aye, 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 aye," he yelled. His mother chased him. It was 2:30 in the afternoon, and the boy hadn't had his nap. His mother wasn't worried. She rested when he rested, and soon he'd need a rest. "Aye, aye, 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 aye," the boy yelled. He ran in a crooked line, stomping his feet as if he were a monster or a giant. Besides pointing to boys on bikes, the boy liked to point at dogs. His mother worried about the dogs. Some barked, some ran at the boy as if they were about to attack. Some licked his face. The boy grabbed the hair of the long-haired dogs. "Woof," he said. "Woof, woof." One dog ran in circles around him. The boy laughed, spinning to see the dog. Inevitably, he fell down. He fell down often. Today, the park had no dogs. The boy ran with his stick. "Aye, aye, 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 aye," he yelled. His mother chased after him. The day before, the elderly woman who lived next door to the boy had told the boy's mother that she had cancer. The boy's doctors thought it was operable, but they weren't sure. The elderly woman had a daughter in Vancouver and a son in Indiana. The elderly woman's husband had been dead 5 years. She often invited the boy and his mother to her house for afternoon tea. She didn't have grandchildren, and she told the boy's mother what a pleasant young son she had. She bought the boy toys and knitted him sweaters. The boy's mother had told her husband about the elderly woman's cancer when he got home from work. The boy sat on his lap. His father had just kissed him on the mouth. The boy's mother said the elderly woman's cancer might be operable. The boy's father asked, "What's the prognosis if it isn't?" "I don't know." All the boy's grandparents were still alive. They all loved the boy tremendously, and the boy's father feared the day any of them might die. The boy's mother watched the boy run across the park. "Ay, ay, 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 ay!" He waved his stick, threw it, and then fell forward onto his face. The boy's mother waited for the wail. The boy was tired, and she expected him to start crying soon. The boy lay on his stomach, silent. He rolled over and laughed at his mother. "Had enough?" she asked, picking him up. He laughed again and kissed her, then slapped her cheeks. "Ay, ay, 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 ay!" That's the life of a 2-year-old, according to me. I figure I have to read the story, The Lizard, which is the main image from the title. The Lizard originally appeared in an anthology about work and sex. It was edited by Matthew Firth, who's standing at the back there. And the origins of the story was basically Matthew said, "I'm doing this anthology about work and sex. If you have any stories about work and sex, send them to me." And I said, "Well, don't have any stories about work and sex, but I can put one together." So this was the result, and it was kind of, it was not, anyway, it was sort of an on-demand story. Anyway, The Lizard. The lizard was at it again. It wasn't exactly a lizard, Lenny knew. When he was 6, Susan had urged him to swallow a salamander. And before she could count 1, 2, 3, he'd gulped down the creature, bulging eyes and all. For 20 years, the ghost of the salamander had come alive while he slept. It crawled around the outside of his stomach and pressed against his lungs. Lenny let out deep, pain-filled groans in his sleep. Every woman he'd ever slept with, except Susan, left him within 2 weeks. Last year, he'd managed to maintain a relationship with Elantra, a married neighbor, for 7 months, because he limited their time together for a couple of hours every Sunday afternoon. They cuddled, caressed, sucked, and he was careful not to nap. Even when her husband was out of town, he refused to sleep with her. She thought he was being cautious, considerate. Then once he nodded off after a session of sloppy lovemaking and woke up to find a note on the pillow. "Now I know the real you." He never heard from her again. No one could love him but Susan. Susan loved everyone but him. "We're friends, Lenny, friends, you understand?" He didn't, but nodded anyway. He asked her to run away with him to Vegas. A little gambling, a quick wedding, a couple 3 shows. But she said no. No gambling, no shows, no wedding. But she didn't stop sleeping with him. In between Larry and Bruce. In between Bruce and Alan. All the way through Frank and Jerry. Now she started something with a man named Darth. Lenny said, "Get out of town." "Darth?" I didn't believe it either. I don't believe it. I saw his driver's license. He changed his name. There's no way his parents could have done that. Maybe, she said, Darth Smith. That was him. "Darth Smith?" "Yes, Lenny." She was frustrated with him. "Darth Smith, that's his name. Now shut up." The lizard was at it again. They were curled up together in Lenny's dusty 1-bedroom apartment in the attic of an old Toronto Victorian mansion. The subway rumbled beneath them. "Ugh," Lenny said. He lay back and tried to breathe. Susan rolled over and stroked his stomach. When he woke up, he was alone. Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays, he worked at Pet's Revival, a small pet store in a half-deserted Scarborough mall. In the old suburbs, long ago descended past kitsch, the boulevard that had once symbolized everything modern was now lined with apartment blocks housing the new urban poor. Slovaks and Chinese, Pakistanis and Guatemalans, world geopolitics in a microcosm. The store was owned by Cindy Tneski, the daughter of his mother's friend. He started looking after the mutts, rabbits, and tropical fish after his unemployment ran out 2 years earlier. Pet survival was meant to connote a renewed interest in the family dog. Cindy said, "We're trying to attract the family market, the church-going market. We sell cute pets, simple pets, pets all families need to remind them how to love." For the longest time, Lenny thought of pet survival like a pet exorcism service or pet tent evangelism. One night he stayed late and used the store's computer to design a poster for the front window. "Missing Fifi? We'll bring her back from the beyond. Save Rex from hellfire, it's not too late." In the end, he erased the files. He needed the job and didn't think Cindy would get the joke. He liked Cindy. She treated him well. She'd never been less than courteous, and she showed a genuine interest in his future. She sent him on a training course for grooming domestic pets, gave him her pet-keeping magazines, and asked him about the feeding patterns of poodles, common diseases of long-haired cats, and how to color-code your fish tank. Slowly, the store's name made sense to him. Pets Revival. Of course, it was all about love. But Susan kept asking him when he was going to get a real job. Well, about the time you get a real boyfriend. This time, they were at her place watching Terms of Endearment. He asked her, "Have you ever thought about getting a dog? Are you crazy?" "No." "Well, where would I keep him?" "In a cage." "I'm not keeping a dog in a cage." "Why not?" "It's inhumane." "No, they like it." "They don't. They get used to it. They learn to expect it." "They don't." "They do. They get anxious if they spend too much time in undefined spaces." Susan crossed her eyes and stuck out her tongue. She said, "I'm not getting a dog. Let's forget about that." "Why would you even suggest such a thing?" "Well," he said, "pets remind us how to love." Susan's parents split up when they were 15. She followed her mother to North Bay. The lizard cried for her. Lenny threw himself on the floor in the night. His parents sent him to a psychiatrist. The doctor said, "What's the problem, son?" "I have a lizard inside of me." "What kind of lizard?" "Well, first it was a salamander, now it's a lizard, a fossilized lizard. It wakes up in the night and crawls around my body." "When did this start?" "When I was 6. The doctor made some notes on his clipboard and sent Lenny for blood tests, arranged for Lenny to come to the hospital overnight to monitor his sleep patterns. Nothing happened. The lizard did not stir. Lenny didn't throw himself against the floor. The doctor asked, "Are you involved in sports?" "No." "Any after-school clubs or activities?" "No." "What are your interests?" 18th century German romantic poetry and post-war Japanese comics. "Perhaps you should find some interest you can share with your peers." Lenny tried to interest his thing in other girls. Only the class drug queen came close. Dominique had arrived a year earlier from Montreal, carting a case of peeper pills and enough red lipstick to coat the CN Tower. One day she whispered to Lenny, "You're next." But that afternoon she found herself diverted to juvenile detention and a life of something grander than petty crime and promiscuity. Lenny started sleeping with Cindy at a conference on the emotional lives of cats. It happened in Niagara Falls at the same hotel where Cindy had honeymooned with her first husband. Who seduced who, Susan wanted to know later. He didn't want to say. It just happened. No, it doesn't just happen. The lizard led. They were in Susan's bedroom. Susan was under the covers with a hot water bottle. Darth had gone back to his wife. He'd taken Susan's television and VCR. He'd come in the middle of the night, deposited his copy of her house key in the mailbox. Lenny sat on the floor, one leg in front of him, the other tight to his chest. Susan pulled the cover over her face. Lenny told Susan that Cindy had invited him to Niagara Falls because she didn't have enough money for 2 rooms. They shared a suite and each had a bed. The conference took place over a Friday night and a Saturday. The keynote speaker, a veterinarian from Louisiana, spoke about the dream lives of cats, domesticated versus non-domesticated. The doctor measured the electricity of brains in the cats. Lenny translated the doctor's science: electricity, sleep, high frequency, low frequency, no significant differences to report. Afterwards, they made their way to the bar. Cindy stared into her martini and told him about her first cat, her first dog, her first goldfish, her first gerbil, her first parakeet, her first hamster, her first guinea pig, her first mouse, her first rat, her first ant farm, her first worm collection. All before I was 10. Cindy waved to the bartender. "Second martini, please." "No reptiles, though. My parents drew the line at reptiles. No reptiles allowed." And I think it was a good rule. Lenny sipped his beer. "Reptiles aren't for families." That was my mother's rule. I've stuck to it. It makes good sense. The lizard growled. Cindy started to play with a loose string on the arm of Cindy's jacket. Cindy started to play with a loose string on the arm of Lenny's jacket. I think I'll just end there. You kind of see where it's going. So.